I remember, I seem to do this all the time, and I don't mean to. I'm so glad Sharon is teaching children's worship this morning. I remember one time that Sharon got incredibly mad at me. I know that's a shocker. You didn't know that your preacher and his wife ever have arguments, did you? But I remember this has been years ago. I remember it like it was yesterday. She got incredibly mad at me. I mean, not like divorce mad, but she was like, I'm so mad at you that I'm leaving right now, and I do not want to be in your presence or countenance right now. I don't want to be around you. Husbands, wives, you ever been there? And she said, you're a big jerk, and you're a smart aleck, and I don't want to be around you right now, and I am leaving. And I was like, well, where are you going? I don't know, but I'm leaving. I said, okay. So she was gone for a few minutes, and I noticed I never heard the garage door go up. I gave it a few minutes. I walk out to the garage, and I said, hey, I thought you were leaving. She's sitting there crying, and she said, I can't find the keys. She would have driven around the block or something. Anger is going to happen, but we have to learn how to control it. Anger has been compared to the combustible explosions in a car engine that produce the power to make the car move. When those explosions are under control, they take the car safely to its destination. But if instead of controlling the flow of gas to produce orderly explosions, if instead it ignited all the gas in the tank at once, both the car and ourselves would be blown up. It's all about controlling anger. Will Rogers once said, people who fly into a rage seldom make a good landing. Look, if you're doing these things that actually lead to sin when you deal with anger, I'm talking about things like losing your temper, that's sin. When you're getting vengeful, that's sin. When you become full of malice and rage, when you start thinking hateful thoughts, when you're wishing the worst for others, when you're becoming envious, when you're developing an unforgiving spirit, and the list goes on and on and on and on. Bottom line, it's not going to work out well because you let your anger turn to sin. When you lose your temper, you always lose. So, what are some biblical solutions? I really searched this through, and like I said, there's 250 some odd verses about anger, and we can't hit them all this morning. So I pray God, and really over the last 2 weeks, God help me kind of hone in on some things that help me and that will help our church. So here they are. If you're taking notes, I gave you a blank slate. It's the first thing I could tell you from a biblical standpoint about handling anger is this: make a commitment to controlling it. Commit to controlling it. Make a commitment. Go to God and commit, Lord, this is something I've got to get under control. I'm committing to do it, whatever it takes. Proverbs 29:22. I don't think we've got these on the screen, but you can just jot them down, just look at them later. Proverbs 29:22 says, a hot-tempered man starts fights and gets into all kinds of trouble. And don't you know that and you know them, and maybe you are one of them, some people thrive on that. Some people thrive on getting angry about stuff. It's like what makes their motor run. But commit to controlling. The way you act, here's the bottom line. The way you act is usually determined by the way you feel, isn't it? And those of you that know me well, and some of you I don't know well, and I want to get to know you, but I've talked about this a lot, that feelings can be deceptive. Our Christianity, our faith should not be based on feelings. It should be based on truth. But often the way you act is determined by the way you feel. You have to get to a point where you quit saying you cannot control it because you feel that way, and you start saying, I can control it through Christ who gives me the ability to control it. You quit making excuses and you resolve to deal with it. You can say all day long, I can't control it. And I will say I don't believe that because God says that you can. He said through Christ all things are possible. Amen. Here's the bottom line. Every time you blow your lid, you had an opportunity to not blow your lid. Let me give you an example. You've probably been here before. Those of you that are married, you're in a fight with your spouse. I mean, you're going at it over something, and really, when you look back at it later, it really was dumb. It didn't even really matter. And usually that's what most fighting's about. Sometimes it's over legit stuff, but a lot of times it's over nothing. You're fighting with your spouse. I mean, you're going at it, and the phone rings, and you pick up the phone. Hello? Oh, I'm doing great. Everything's great. Yeah, we'll see you tomorrow night. That sounds good. Don't you? Or you're on your way to church, and I mean, all Hades is breaking loose in the back seat, and you're trying to drive, and you're slapping kids behind you. And you're like, we're headed to church. And you get out of the church, and your shirt's untucked, and your face is all red when you get out of the church, and you walk up, and the first impression team's at the door. How you doing? Doing great. Your hair's all messed up. I know. I watch some of y'all drive in the mornings. I'm telling you. Bottom line is you have more control over your anger than you think. Only by the help of Jesus Christ, you can control it. Every time you have an opportunity to get mad, you have an opportunity to not get mad. Secondly, I would tell you, besides committing to controlling it, before you let your anger turn into sin, I would say that you need to count the cost. How you handle your anger can cost you a whole lot more than you think. Handle it well, even when you're going to blow it sometimes. That really impressed me this week. It was the impression that God put upon me when I knew I had blew it in that phone conversation. And I said, somehow, some way, this has got to be resolved so that I can respect this person and so that person can respect me when it's all said and done. So I would say when you do mess up, do everything you can, whether you think you ought to or not, whether you're the one that caused it or not, whether you think you should or shouldn't, do everything you can to make that wrong into a right. But increasingly, before you ever get to that place, you can learn to make that decision beforehand and realize that what you do is going to have consequences. What you say is going to have consequences. It can cost you a whole lot if you don't handle it the right way. And that's what motivates us to change. The Bible says there's always a price tag with our sin. Proverbs 29:22 says a hot-tempered man commits many sins. Proverbs 15:18 says a hot-tempered man stirs up dissension. Proverbs 14:29 says a quick-tempered man displays folly. Proverbs 14:17 says a quick-tempered man does foolish things. Proverbs 11:29 says he who brings trouble on his family will inherit only wind. Count the cost. There are consequences. Here's the point. Whenever I lose my temper, I lose. You don't make it to the top if you're continually blowing your top, you know? I don't know if you've noticed it before, but in the word danger, there's the word anger, right? Anger is dangerous. You could lose your family. You could lose your job. You could lose your health by losing your temper. Uncontrolled anger always alienates, and it always costs you something. Third thing, think rather than throw your tantrum. Think rather than throwing your tantrum. In other words, don't respond impulsively. Learn to be a little bit more patient. Take a deep breath, and if that doesn't work, take 9 or 10. Proverbs 29:11 says, a fool gives full vent to his spirit, but a wise man quietly holds it back. The Living Bible version says, a rebel shouts in anger, but a wise man holds his temper in and cools it. You could say, that a wise man, a wise woman knows how to chill out. Ice, ice, baby, right? How do you keep under self-control? Sometimes you do it by delaying. I'm not talking about delaying for months. I'm not talking to that's a whole different thing. I'm not talking about not dealing with issues and putting it off and wiping it under the rug. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about months. I'm talking about minutes. Sometimes you need to take a step back, and when you feel that pressure build and you're about to blow your top, take time out. Give yourself some time to stop and think, because if you don't stop and think, you're going to almost always do the wrong thing. You're going to respond impulsively. You're going to do what you want to do rather than what Christ says to do. President Thomas Jefferson said, when you get angry, count to 10, and when you're really angry, count to 100. It's good advice. Proverbs 19:11, a man's wisdom gives him patience. You need to begin to ask yourself, when anger comes into your lives, why am I angry? And if I express that anger, then number 2, what's going to happen? And number 3, will the expression of my anger really resolve the issue, or will it tear up relationships? Will it hurt God's kingdom? Will it make me look like an idiot? Number 4, here's another step. Because we said anger is a reality. The Bible doesn't say that anger is sin. It's what we do with the anger that's sin. So anger is a reality. So learn to communicate your anger correctly. We'll go back to our key verse, Ephesians 4:26. For that, in your anger, do not sin. Be angry and do not sin. Is all anger sin? No. God gets angry. He's the one who gave us the capacity to get angry. He's saying that there are right ways to get angry and there are wrong ways. There are appropriate ways to get angry and there are inappropriate ways. You can explode. You can stuff it down someone's throat. That's not right. You can try to suppress your anger, pretend it's not there and pretend it doesn't happen. That's not necessarily right. Or you can learn to confess it, which is right. That means to admit it, deal with it appropriately. Expressing your anger to people sometimes is the very thing that you need to do, but you need to learn to do it in the right way. Talk to them rather than blowing up in their face and saying things that you don't mean and things that you'll regret. Number 5, retrain your mind. Retrain your mind. Romans 12:2 says, be transformed by the renewing of your what? By the renewing of your what? It doesn't say renew the way you feel. It says renew your mind, by the renewing of your mind. Look, you can promise God, we've all been there with other sins as well. You can promise God, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to lose my temper again. And you can say it again and again and again until you're blue in the face, and it will make no difference in the world. You can make New Year's resolutions about it. You can do it over and over. You've heard me many times say that the way you act is often determined by the way you feel, and the way you feel is determined by the way you think. So if you want to change the way you act, then you must change the way you feel. And if you want to change the way you feel, then you must change the way you think. I'm acting angry because I feel angry. And I'm feeling these angry emotions because I'm choosing these angry thoughts. So if I want to change the habitual patterns of being angry, then I need some mental reconditioning. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That's where it starts. I mean, ask yourself before you let your anger get the best of you. Ask yourself, do I enjoy getting angry? Well, no, I really don't. So why am I doing it? Does it produce the intended results I get when I get angry? No, it really just alienates my spouse, and then I don't get dinner, and then all this stuff. I mean, it doesn't really work out the way I thought it would when I chose to get angry. Ask yourself, could I get the intended results in a different way rather than blowing my lid? Transform your mind.